Brother Ron, and welcome to We All Be News Radio and TV, the news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Greetings, family. This is Brother Ron, also known as R2C2H2 the Artivist. Just want to give y'all a quick We All Be Black History Quickie. We are honoring August 17th, marks the birthday of the one and only the great Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the Black Messiah. His middle name was Mosiah, not Messiah, but Mosiah. So his mama knew who he was. Arguably the greatest mass black leader ever produced out of diaspora. He had millions of followers throughout the world. He proclaimed himself to be the president of Africa, although he never stepped foot physically in Africa, which is interesting. Here's a guy who say he's the president of Africa, but he never stepped foot in Africa. But he had a lot of black people throughout the diaspora believing in their great return home, return to our roots. Because he said, a people without history is like a tree without roots. So that's Marcus Garvey. But I just want to make it quick. I know there's this movie coming out called Judas and the Black Messiah that talks about Chairman Fred Hampton Sr., who was assassinated by the state. That's the FBI, the federal government, Chicago Police Department, State Attorney's Office of Illinois. So it was a state-sponsored assassination of Fred Hampton at the age of 21, December 4th, 1969. He was neutralized by his chief bodyguard, William O'Neill, who was an FBI informant and an agent provocateur. He provided the floor plans to the apartment of Fred Hampton. He also fixed Fred's last meal, which made him sleepy. So when the police came to lynch Fred Hampton, he could not defend himself because he was too droggy. Luckily, his fiancee survived, who gave birth to his namesake several weeks later, December 29th, 1969, as Fred Hampton Jr., also known as Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. I bring this up because you can make the case that they should have made a movie in a similar vein based on Marcus Garvey, which is the Judas and the Black Messiah. Because a lot of people don't know that the first black FBI agent, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the first black agent, James Wormley Jones, who was a DC police officer as well as a World War I veteran, a decorated World War I veteran, was hired to neutralize Marcus Garvey. And his name was also known as Agent 800. So you could Google it up, Agent 800, Marcus Garvey, James Wormley Jones. So he was able to get into the inner circle of Marcus Garvey, became a trusted confidant. I think it was other black FBI agents hired as well after James Wormley Jones. And once the government framed Marcus Garvey for mail fraud, it's interesting now we're talking about mail fraud, right? Because now it's 2020 and the President Donald Trump, who people would like to see pardon Marcus Garvey. People trying to get that in Trump's ear, in this administration ear, to possibly offer a posthumous pardon to Marcus Garvey, because Donald Trump also pardoned, of course, Jack Johnson, something that Barack Obama would not do. Barack Obama did not believe in reparations. He's afraid of his own black shadow, as far as I'm concerned. So he was not going to pardon no Marcus Garvey. He didn't pardon Jack Johnson. So we're talking about mail fraud, right? People talking about the government picking up these mailboxes. Donald Trump don't want to give funding for the post office service. I guess allegedly, people in the post office said that if they did do a mail-in thing this year, it would not work because they would not get the mail-in votes in time. Stuff like that. There's a lot of confusion. 2020 is just a big psyops. But go back to when they got Marcus Garvey on mail fraud. He was set up by the government I believe he was deported back in 1924. Not mistaken. Y'all can look it up. But he was framed. But the first black FBI agent was hired to neutralize Marcus Garvey. So I want to talk a little bit about Marcus Garvey. Things that y'all may not know. He was from Jamaica. Now, 100 years later, we got Kamala Harris running for vice president. Daddy was Jamaican, mama's East Indian. 100 years ago, we had Marcus Garvey from Jamaica, man. Jamaica. He was black. He was Jamaican. It's interesting that foundational black Americans and American descendants of slaves really made and broke Marcus Garvey. They made him the success he was as a leader, and they broke him by sabotaging his Back to Africa movement, his United Negro Improvement Association, his Black Star Line. So the government could not bring down Marcus Garvey without the Negroes' help, in particular the Black Boule. And I'm gonna get into that. I want to get this out there because I think it's important that as we as new black media, supposedly quote unquote new black media, that we reclaim the narrative and we give our own their proper due. We should not wait for Hollywood to do that. I'm not really having any high expectations for that Judas and the Black Messiah movie about Fred Hampton, because I am a student of history. I have interviewed family members as well as associates of Fred Hampton about the legacy of the man. I studied the legacy, so no Hollywood movie is going to impress me by the stuff I already know for self. For example, a lot of people don't know that Fred Hampton's mom was the babysitter for Emmett Till. She was the babysitter of Emmett Till. Yes, that Emmett Till who was lynched horribly down in Mississippi, the Chicago boy. His mama opened up the casket for the world to see what they did to her baby boy, her only child. That Emmett Till. And it's ironic, Emmett Till died at 14. That's when the government started watching Fred Hampton at the age of 14. They started watching him because he was very charismatic and effective organizer even at that age. So let's get back to Marcus Garvey, because let's go back to the 60s, because J. Edgar Hoover had that famous memo about preventing the rise of the Black Messiah, identifying potential Black Messiahs who could unify and electrify the masses for revolution to overthrow the Republic of America. But you could argue that the FBI was built not on the arrest and the prosecution and persecution or execution of public enemies in the 30s, like John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde, those type of people, but they're actually the foundation of the FBI was built on the sacrifice, the blood sacrifice, and the crucifixion of one Marcus Mosiah Garvey. See, Garvey was made by foundational Black Americans and so-called American descendants of slaves. A lot of the people that ended up joining his United Negro Improvement Association was first a part of the Black slavery reparations movement led by this sister, this righteous ancestor named Callie House, a former enslaved Black woman from Nashville. She led an organization that predated the arrival of the United Negro Improvement Association that was focused on getting benefits and reparations from the government for former enslaved Black people. And they got her own mail fraud. They framed on mail fraud. There's a great book out by the academic scholar Mary Frances Berry, wrote basically a biography on Callie House. My face is black is true, or something like that. But just look up Callie House and Mary Frances Berry, and you'll find her book about Callie House. It need to be read. But in her organization, you had several 100,000 ex-slaves in her organization push for reparations. A lot of folks end up joining Marcus Garvey, United Negro Improvement Association, Back to Africa movement. So we gotta, this is the importance of telling our story, because I'm going to put these names back in their proper places and context, and you can look this stuff up. So Marcus Garvey was a pen pal to Booker T. Washington. That Booker T. Washington. He didn't found Tuskegee Institute, but he grew into a powerhouse, right? He was appointed by the state of Alabama to head Tuskegee Institute, which is now known as Tuskegee University. And he was he was the number one Black leader in America after the death of Frederick Douglass in 1895. He did that great Atlanta Compromise speech. He said we could be as separate as the fingers on the hand, but one as the fist in terms of progress when it relates to all our mutual interests. He was talking about to the white folks, don't be afraid. We don't want integration. We just want our own stuff to do our own thing. We don't need to be integrated with y'all. So he became the #1 black leader in America, for better or for worse. You know, all black folks were not with Booker T. Washington, especially what we will now call as the Black Boule. You know, people like you had critics like Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, William Monroe Trotter, and other like elitist types who were not the Booker T. Washington bootstraps. You know, we don't want no fancy education. We don't need to know about no philosophy. You just need to work and scrub and all that stuff. No, I'm just simplifying. But Marcus Garvey was a big fan of Booker T. Washington. Matter of fact, he used to write to Booker T. Washington from Jamaica and I believe other places to get inspiration to start a similar situation in Jamaica, something similar to the Tuskegee Institute that Booker T. Washington had going on in Alabama. And one of the reasons why Marcus Garvey came to America was to connect with Booker T. Washington and possibly work at Tuskegee Institute. But by that time, the great man died under mysterious circumstances. We still don't really know what happened to Booker T. Washington officially. They never really said exactly. I mean, they sound like natural causes. But it's interesting to note that a lot of Booker T. Washington's associates in his circle, including his wives, died under questionable circumstances. And I know, talking to a sister who's a retired nurse down in Mobile, Alabama, she wrote a book, Death in 60 Days, I believe it's called. It's a great book to read. It talks basically alternative explanation for the death of Booker T. Washington, when she said he was murdered. He was poisoned by a Haitian. Know what the old timers told her, the elders told her he was poisoned because Booker T. Washington was very outspoken about the U.S. occupation of Haiti. The Marines came in to Haiti back in the 19-teens, I believe 1915. They occupied Haiti. I think they seized their gold. I don't think Haiti ever got the gold back, all their wealth that was seized by the United States government. It's ironic that here is the first black free republic in the Western hemisphere that inspired Simon Bolivar to lead the South American Revolution, and they had to pay reparations because they won. And the French destroyed their economy because they cut down all their trees to make this furniture, and it caused soil erosion, so they couldn't even grow their own crops for generations, and they got to pay back money like Zimbabwe, paying back those white farmers billions of dollars. I mean, it's just crazy that black folks still pay a tax even when they whip the enemy. But anyway, Booker T. Washington wrote an op-ed, came out October 18th, 1915, in T. Thomas Fortune's New York Age, another forgotten black media icon pioneer we should know more about. And also William Monroe Trotter, who was a big critic of Booker T. Washington. He had his own paper in Boston called The Guardian. He was the first black Phi Beta Kappa at Harvard University. He was a rival. He, against W.E.B. Du Bois, they wanted the same woman. He ended up marrying the woman that Du Bois wanted to marry. He lost his wife actually in the Spanish flu epidemic or pandemic of 1918, 1919. So it's interesting, like we're dealing with the same type of interesting stuff 100 years later with the COVID-19 pandemic. But yeah, he died. So Marcus came over here. And Marcus, that's a former slave. Not American descendant of slave, but actually a former enslaved American that was his hero that he was pen pals with. So his first professional speaking engagement, from my understanding, you can look this up to verify, he was given his first speaking engagement in America by none other than A.L.L. Randolph. Yes, the A.L.L. Randolph, the architect of the original plan to march on Washington back in, I believe it was 1943 or 1941, I think 1943. And 20 years later, they postponed it 20 years later, and Dr. King came on the scene. Dr. King is now organized the March on Washington. He was a speaker, a featured speaker on the program, but it was 20 years in the making. But he's a guy who organized the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, 10,000 guys named George. I believe they did a Showtime movie about that 20 years ago, about how A.L.L. Randolph organized the first significant black labor union in this country with the guys, the Pullman porters. But I think Andre Braugher is a great actor. He played A.L.L. Randolph. And I think it came out about 20 years ago. Y'all could probably find this on YouTube. Maybe Real Black got this uploaded on YouTube or something. I don't know. It's out there. I'm just here to point y'all to some directions. But yeah, so A. Phil Randolph gave him his first professional speaking engagement in America. So he got all this help from black folks, foundational black Americans helping him set up his foundation. Now, Marcus Garvey also wanted to, I believe, at one point work with Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. They didn't see the eye to eye on a lot of things. They had a falling out. It was very bitter. Resorted to name calling on each side. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like a rap beef, like 50 Cent and Ja Rule or Biggie and Tupac. But it was back then. They didn't have rap back then. They had some interesting stuff going on. But with that said, a lot of people know also that Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Viet Cong resistance, the spiritual father of the Viet Cong resistance, he actually used to come to America from overseas just to hear Marcus Garvey speak in Harlem. So the Viet Cong resistance, the Vietnam War, has connections to Marcus Mosiah Garvey because Ho Chi Minh was definitely inspired by this man. You can find evidence of that being true. Marcus Garvey, a lot of people that end up becoming members of the Nation of Islam, they were Garveyites. Malcolm X parents was famously Garveyites, activists, very active in the movement. I think Elijah Muhammad, some of his people were Garveyites, and a lot of other people. I believe Farrakhan said that his mom was they from the islands. His people from the islands. I believe his mom was a Garveyite, and Rosa Parks. She talked about how her grandfather was a real big supporter of Garveyite, but I guess he was too fair skinned or something like that because Garvey had a distrust of fair skinned blacks, light skinned blacks for whatever reason. Colorism still exists today. It works both ways in the spectrum, but he still was a Garveyite. That's the household that Rosa Parks grew up in because she was fair skinned, but she was definitely pro black, and she believed in self defense because she actually did the eulogy for Robert F. Williams when he passed back in 1996. He did his eulogy in North Carolina, so she was definitely about that action, and she wasn't just tired because her feet were swollen. She actually was an activist, a strategist, and all this stuff. She went to the Highlander School up in Tennessee to train for activism and stuff like that. So we got to reclaim that narrative. It's very important to do so. So with that said, Marcus Garvey had his enemies. Like I said, the first FBI agent of color, James Wormley Jones, was hired to neutralize Marcus Garvey. I believe the government put sugar in his fuel tanks on his ship, the Black Star Line. Ships were sabotaged by the U.S. government. They framed him for mail fraud, what they tried to do with the 2020 election. And then, we went from having Marcus Garvey to having a Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. All right. Now, she's Jamaican. Her dad's Jamaican. He claimed they own slaves, come from slave-owning family. And people said, well, no, her family owned slaves in Jamaica. I mean, look, I'm a black American, foundational black American. My people went through the slave thing on both sides. I had relatives that own other relatives. I had relatives that were born into it. You know what I'm saying? So that's not the thing, but do she really identify as being black? Now, Marcus Garvey definitely identified with being black, with being African, even though he never stepped foot in Africa. He said he's the president of Africa, right? Like an Emperor Jones thing. I call it Emperor Jones syndrome, right? Because it's a play that Eugene O'Neill, this white guy, did called Emperor Jones. It's made into a movie starring Paul Robeson. Y'all could probably find this online, but it's basically use Marcus Garvey as the inspiration for the Emperor Jones character, and they were trying to discredit Marcus Garvey, kind of like people try to discredit Dr. Umar Johnson, whose birthday also is in Black August, and that's another topic for another day. But think about, we had the UNIA 100 years ago. Now we got INFACT, that Grandmaster J organization. They talking about he also talking about forming some type of sovereign land for black people. And that's what people don't even talk about really when they talk about it. They talk about the, parade up in Stone Mountain, the formation stuff. But really, it's interesting to listen to him. I don't have no problem with anybody, with any organization that's about bringing light to the plight of Black Native Americans of America, not recent immigrants, none of that. I'm talking about specifically Black Americans. Your ancestors came through the chattel slavery, went through the lynching, all that stuff. Generational wealth stolen. My people. I'm in the Mississippi Delta. I'm talking about the mud people, the people of America, because we also had Black folks here before the Mayflower and all this other stuff and the Clotilda. We already had Black folks over here, but this is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Marcus Garvey. But you see how Black folks over here, Black Americans, native U.S. citizens, played a part in making Marcus Garvey this worldwide success. He couldn't do it anywhere else but in America. So people want to, crap on native Black Americans. I know I meet people. I remember I was at the opening weekend for the lynching memorial site in Alabama, and I met a brother. He actually was going to medical school in Oklahoma. His folks were immigrants from Ghana, I believe. I'm not mistaken. They were from Ghana. And he was born here, so he's first generation. And he missed his medical exam just to pay homage to the ancestors we lost in this horrible genocide over here, this Black Holocaust. So he actually skipped out on his medical exam, made some arrangements, and drove from Oklahoma to Alabama to be there the opening weekend. And we had a very open and frank discussion because he had to put his parents in their place. Because they will discourage, they will say discouraging or disparaging remarks about Black Americans, native born, that we were lazy, we complacent, we didn't take advantage of the opportunities. Then he corrected his parents, said, Mom and Dad, y'all chose to come here. Y'all know y'all history. Y'all had your identity intact. Y'all chose. Y'all had the free will to choose to come to another place to make a space for yourself, but you had your identity intact. You knew your mother tongue. You knew what tribe you're from. You knew all that stuff. You had your backstory. We as Black Americans, native born of this soil, we have been denied our Black story. It has been distorted. It has been censored. It has been hidden in plain sight because they don't teach you how to think in school. And a lot of times your parents don't know the history. You're lucky if you talk to your elders that they're still around. But a lot of times we don't really connect with our elders like that, So it is what it is. But this is why it's important to use these tools that I'm using, the internet, social media, to get these messages out there because it's very important. So Marcus Garvey also had a rival in his organization. This brother named Reverend James Eason. His name is Reverend James Eason. It's hard to find information on the brother, but he had a following within the UNIA. It's like if Marcus Garvey was Elijah Muhammad, then this brother had to be Malcolm X. Now, from my understanding, this brother was compromised by the federal government. He was going to be a informant, or he was an informant, or they flipped him, or they were in the process of flipping him against Marcus Garvey. And so this brother actually was, I think it was the early, I won't say it was 21, 22. I don't know. Y'all look it up. Take a look. It should be online, but sometimes it's not always online. But the brother name was Reverend James Eason. Let me make sure I spell his name right. So y'all can look it up. And like I said, I think everybody who's been reaching out to me over the last several months, I need some researchers because this stuff is bigger than me. I mean, Reverend James Eason, just to make sure I spell his name. Reverend James Eason. Okay. I'm going to spell his name for y'all. And thank y'all for supporting We All Be, man. It's very important. Appreciate the people out there. Okay, his name was James Walker Hood Eason. Eason is spelled E-A-S-O-N. And it's hard to find any really information on the brother. But he was like, the Malcolm X. He was very charismatic in his own right. And I think that, it's all about divide and conquer. People got to realize that Black power is solidarity and unity, fits together. White power is divide and conquer, spread apart. That's how they keep power. They use our Black power against us to keep their power. They splinter Black power in the system. like this, because we're not, the Constitution was not written for us. They say we're 3/5 human beings, so we're not even respected as a full human being in a system, and we demand justice from a system that don't respect us as a person. They say we were the descendants of Dred Scott. Roger Taney, Supreme Court Chief Justice, told in his decision that Dred Scott has no rights, nor his descendants, that should be respected by the white man. So they basically tell you, we don't care about you Negroes. But y'all keep on begging. Y'all have these allegiances and loyalties to these parties that don't give a you know what about us. None of them do. We shouldn't be this loyal to people that don't care. But because we don't get information, this is like simple stuff about Marcus Garvey. This stuff I'm just putting down here right now. We're not even making this household stuff. This should be like, oh, we should know about James Wormley Jones. We should know about Marcus Garvey. We should know about Reverend James Eason and what happened. And let me see. Yeah, they actually, the brother was killed. Reverend James Eason was assassinated in 1923 to keep him from testifying about Garvey's alleged fraudulent use of donations. It's kind of like if somebody killed somebody over Dr. Umar Johnson. People he using the money for the school, and then one of Dr. Johnson's followers, one of his, whatever, went kamikaze, whatever, say, oh, death before dishonor and all this stuff, and went to, avenge his name. So basically what they were saying, that this brother was killed down in a place called the Black House in New Orleans because he was about to testify against Marcus Garvey, because there was alleged that Marcus Garvey was misusing funds. Marcus Garvey was getting a lot of money from black people back then for the Back to Africa movement. And I think, well, Marcus Garvey's really big mistake was that he was not a real businessman like that. There was a lot of money to be handling. People buying the certificates in the Black Star Line, all that stuff. I mean, I'm saying, I don't think, in my honest opinion, looking back on it, if you just do the research, I think he was very sincere about helping black people, but he was overwhelmed by everything. And also in his circle, he didn't help people you could be trustworthy. A lot of these people, I ain't gonna say a lot, but some of these people were taking advantage of, like, it's any organization. You even look at Elijah Muhammad in the Nation of Islam situation. People, you got all types of people in these organizations, and everybody got their own idea about how the organization should be run, about what they should get, and all that stuff. So that's nothing new. But that's why I say it's important to talk about these things, because people could do things in your name you not give consent to. Like, people may accuse the nation, some of the members, of killing Malcolm on the orders of Elijah, but Elijah said, don't touch the brother. My understanding, he said, don't touch him. But you have those zealous followers. That's in anything, like even fans in sports, like people like this Dallas Cowboys fans. They said, we lost on Sunday. We lost it. I ain't know Jerry Jones was paying you too. He don't even want to pay Dak Prescott. You on the payroll too. You don't even play a down. You're not even in Dallas right now in the stadium, dressed up and suited and booted. So see how it works. All this is programming. So look up the brother, Reverend James. You can find anything about him. I think somebody did a documentary. It's hard to find certain things. Everything is not on the internet. I know, but we can't Google it. It means it doesn't exist. There's a lot of things in the oceans we don't know about. The ocean is more unknown in a lot of ways than space, as they say. But who knows, right? But knowledge is limited. Like what Harry Truman said, the only thing new is the history you don't know. So Marcus Garvey thing is fascinating. So yeah, the brother Reverend James Eason was assassinated down in New Orleans, and people don't understand that Marcus Garvey's greatest stronghold, his most loyal supporters, was Louisiana. That was his most loyal supporters. When he was deported, he left to the port of New Orleans or Orleans to go back to Jamaica. So, and once James Wormley Jones was no of use to J. Edgar Hoover, they got rid of him. And he's kind of like vanished from history. You probably found stuff on him, but I always tell people that Black history is stranger than science fiction and better than a Hollywood movie. If you told the truth about Black people, it's better than a superhero. Matter of fact, the superheroes are based on us. Wonder Woman, Superman. That's our stories. We got real superheroes. Think about Black August. Think about Charlie Parker. He practiced 11 to 15 hours a day for 4 years to learn his saxophone. Think about Kobe Bryant. All them jump shots in the gym. You wasn't in the gym while he was shooting, right? I messed up that line. Stay skimming line with Rick Ross and Drake. You're talking about you wasn't with Kobe while he was shooting in the gym. I got it wrong, but y'all know what I'm talking about, the hip hop fans and rap fans stuff. But anyway, I think that's all I want to say. You know, they said Marcus Garvey died reading his obituary over in London. Like he had a heart attack or a stroke or an aneurysm and died. This back in 1940. So he never made it over to Africa, but we still talk about Marcus Garvey and what he tried to do to this day. We should study that. All our great black leaders know the value of media, of having your own media platform. He had the Negro World, of controlling your narrative. Marcus Garvey understood that he was a newspaper publisher guy, had his own paper, had a lot of brilliant minds writing for his people like J.A. Rogers, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, I believe contributed to the Negro World at one point. So he had a lot of brilliant minds around him, but the hate is real. And also, when people talk about Marcus, people say, well, he did business with the Klan. Okay, politics made for strange bedfellows or for strange bad sheets. You know, you think about somebody like Elijah Muhammad, who will invite a person like George Lincoln Rockwell, the founder of the American Nazi Party, to speak at Saviors or Founders Days. You know, I think he spoke at several Founders Days or Savior Days. George Lincoln Rockwell, I mean, Malcolm didn't care for him, but also the Nation of Islam brought real estate from the Klan in Georgia, where Elijah Muhammad is from, where Malcolm's father's from. You know, so that's just a biz you in their system. I believe that Malcolm found out that Elijah Muhammad was getting big checks from H.L. Hunt. This is the H.L. Hunt, who was one of the shadowy figures behind possibly the Kennedy assassination. There's a movie starring Burt Lancaster from the 70s, I think we call it Executive Action. It's basically about H.L. Hunt. He plays the H.L. Hunt character who was involved in the assassination of a high-level government official, I believe the president. So it basically tells you, Hollywood has no problem telling you what they're doing. Like I'll tell people right now, look at that movie, Project Power, starring Jamie Foxx. Real, I think about it, it talks about black people, what they're doing to us, like we use as guinea pigs and lab rats with this vaccination stuff. I just had on the sister, Dr. Stella Emanuel, talking about the movie They Live. How she believes so many people are demons and reptiles and aliens and stuff. And, you know, it's either here or there, but I'm just like trying to give y'all some food for thought to think about. This stuff is very cray-cray. But I want to read something because he actually was assassinated. Reverend James Eason was assassinated January 1st, 1923, down in New Orleans at a place called the Black House. And Marcus Garvey was deported from America to the port of New Orleans back in 1927. I think the mail fraud thing was 24 for him. But I want to read an article. There's a woman, college professor, this came out in 2005. She actually had an Eason Museum down in Tallahassee at the local community college, I believe. Her name is Sitamon Youssef. At that time, she was a college instructor, and she's known as Tallahassee, Florida poet. And she did a book on Garvey, trying to expose him as a fraud. She was teaching the English department at the Tallahassee Community College at the time when this article came out. And she opened the Easton Civil Rights Museum down at the Tallahassee Progressive Center. But she actually did a 45-minute documentary about the Easton assassination. I don't know if it's available online anywhere, but she said that the History Channel at the time was interested in featuring it on their channel. So I'm going to read a little bit what she has to say about this. And for the, and y'all just research, and hopefully if y'all know more information about this, y'all know how to get in touch with me. Email, text, calls, whatever. Let me see. I'm going to read this story. She said, Garvey believed black people would never receive justice in white-dominated societies and sought to return blacks to their ancestral home. Originally, the message resonated with Eason. After serving as an African Methodist Episcopal Zion minister, he left the pulpit to join Garvey's organization. His decision came after the tumultuous summer of 1919. We all know it's Red Summer 1919. When race riots broke out in 26 American cities, Eason traveled the nation, raising more than $1 million for Garvey's panoply of businesses, including the Black Star Line. So, $1 million, is that in 1921 money or today's money? But that's still a lot of money regardless. So he kind of, like I said, it was like Malcolm. Malcolm would travel to to help build the nation, to open up mosques throughout the country. So he was kind of like a Malcolm X figure, traveling around, spreading the good news, the gospel, all this stuff. But by 1921, he discovered that Garvey had siphoned off most of the money, that none of the three ships were seaworthy. He began to talk to the FBI, and it became known he would testify in federal court. He would testify in federal court against Garvey. But on January 1st, 1923, while in New Orleans for a speech, Easton was shot in the back and killed. He was 36. Malcolm was 39 when he died, right? That's kind of interesting. 3 months later, a laborer named Esau Ramus, who was wanted on a theft charge in New York, was arrested and indicted for the murder. Despite efforts by the FBI in Louisiana to extradite Ramus, he was tried on a theft charge, spent 3 years in prison, and then disappeared. That's interesting. Garvey was eventually sent to prison for mail fraud for having received donations for the inoperable Black Star Line. When he was paroled in 1927, he was deported and later died in England. Okay. So she tried to make the case in her book, Marcus Garvey Exposed. And I'm going to read that part. Though the book only briefly deals with Easton, Yusuf spent the ensuing years collecting information about his life and proof that Garvey had him assassinated. She displays a November 9th, 1922 letter from Garvey to a New Orleans UNIA leader, that's the United Negro Improvement Association, that introduces Ramus as a friend of the movement and places Ramus in the city when Easton visited. She displays a February 3rd, 1923 letter to the Chicago Defender, a prominent black newspaper in which the writer, whose handwriting reportedly matches Ramus's, takes credit for killing Easton. Yusuf said the two letters linked Garvey directly to the murder of Easton. More direct evidence, Yusuf said, would be a copy of the deposition Easton gave the FBI in 1922. But despite hours combing FBI and Library of Congress files, Yusuf has not found a deposition, which she believes was taken by Garvey scholars. You got to understand that the myth of Garvey is larger than life, Yusuf said. To tell the Easton story, you have to discredit Garvey. Yeah, okay. Still, circumstances don't prove anything. Like I said, you can't control people. Like a lot of times, people do things in the name of causes. A lot of people have fought wars and died in wars for the cause of religion. Probably killed more people than anything else, religion. So, circumstantial, whatever, doesn't prove that Garvey actually ordered a hit. Now, like I said, Garvey was compromised by the FBI. He had people in his inner circle. Garvey was not the businessman. He, like Dr. King, wasn't a businessman. When Dr. King was approached by S.B. Fuller and A.G. Gaston, some of the wealthiest black men in the country, saying, look, the Montgomery people want to sell us the bus company. And Dr. King said, we weren't interested. And then you go back to his last speech in Memphis on April 3rd, 1968. He was talking about black businesses, black nationalism, all this stuff. This is after he met with Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in 66 during the Chicago housing movement. You know what I'm saying? He met with a secret meeting with Elijah Muhammad. So he began to see things differently, right? So people grow, people change perspectives and stuff like that. But it does not take away with Garvey, who he inspired with his message and what he was trying to do. Sometimes things ain't always clear cut as they seem. There's a lot of contradictions. We deal in human nature. But Marcus Garvey, I believe he tried to do more good than bad for black people. And things get messy like that. Like a lot of us, we are very hypercritical of the messenger when you should be focusing on the message. And if there's anything in there for us, we need to practice a type of discernment and wisdom and stop putting people up on pedestals and really do for self, because the ancestors, the righteous ancestors, have left the blueprint. If we do in this time right now, this so-called pandemic, we need to be doing a lot of reading, writing, discussing things, group chats and all this stuff, productive stuff as black people. Don't worry about the distractions and the deflections and the reactions. You're going to be revolutionary. You got to prep for it. You understand? This is Black August. So that's all I got to say. Thank you all for listening once again to the artist, the thought provocateur, Brother Ron Speaks, R2C2H2 says. Thank you all for supporting. If you like the words from Brother Heard, please spread the word while you can. YouTube channel, We All Be TV, one word. Cash App R2C2H2, Google Pay, PayPal R2C2H2 at gmail.com. Also, you can buy Art of His Art, R2C2H2.com. You can wear Art of His Art. If you're on YouTube, below the description, the shelf of some of our latest designs on Teespring, R2C2H2's place. So we got to reclaim the narrative. We got to keep it pushing. We got to keep our eyes on the prize. We got to know what the prize look like. We got to discern it. And then we got to go forward. So thank you all for listening once again. Where's the great Duke Ellington? We love you madly. You keep on producing and pushing. Well, I want to say about the H.L. Hunt. Let me go before. Put the part with H.L. Hunt, Dr. Elijah Muhammad. I think Malcolm found out, if you read the Judas Factor, the plot to kill Malcolm X by Carl Evans, that came out some years ago, right after the movie came out, around the time the movie came out, Malcolm X by Spike Lee. He talks about how Malcolm discovered that Elijah was getting these big checks from H.L. Hunt. And like I said, H.L. Hunt was the guy behind the Kennedy, one of the guy key players behind the Kennedy assassination, but also he's the patriarch of the Hunt family. As you all may or may not know, who won the Super Bowl this year was the Kansas City Chiefs. That team was founded by H.L. Hunt's son, Lamar Hunt. Matter of fact, I believe the AFC championship trophy is named for him, the Hunt Trophy. He was one of the founding fathers of the American Football League, which became the American Football Conference. They merged with the NFL. So he was one of the founding fathers of that. So also the Hunt brothers, these are H.L. Hunt's sons. They're trying to corner the silver market back in the 70s. They like to do a New World Order Illuminati thing where they try to control all the world's silver, and it failed. So these are the people that you're dealing with. While y'all focus on the breads and circuses, the people that produce your breads and circuses are also responsible for a lot of the interesting things that happen in history, the unsolved mysteries, the assassination, the coup d'etats, and all that type of stuff. Ooh la la la, ooh la la la. Take a look. It should be online. They scrubbing stuff online now, so who knows? But yeah, so I'm just giving y'all some breadcrumbs. Y'all pick them up, see where they lead, and know that the best is to come. The best is yet to come. Thank you all. God bless. Where's Duke Ellington? We love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing. Righteous.
Hey, everybody, this is Brother Ron. I am asking you all to do me a big favor. Think about supporting the We All Be movement. Your donation is tax deductible. The We All Be Group Incorporated is a recognized 501c3. And I'm just asking you all because I want to keep on bringing y'all quality work through the way that I know how to do best. And I'm going to sing my praises and toot my horn. A lot of y'all were not hip to Dick Gregory until Brother Ron brought him on the We All Be platform, until that Django review we did. Y'all seen another side of Judge Joe Brown, and Judge Joe Brown's message has been amplified. But it was We All Be that brought Judge Joe Brown to y'all back in 2014. And so many others. And we covered so many things. So help us out so we can help you all. Peace.